Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Joining me right now on the phone from Rock Hill, South Carolina is Congressman Mick Mulvaney. He represents South Carolina's 5th Congressional District. Congressman, thanks for being with us.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me.
All right, I want to take a step back. Just before Congress went away for its summer recess, there was a big debate in Washington, in Congress, about this amendment that you supported that was going to cut some of the Pentagon's budget. Some folks are calling this a big win for you politically. Tell us about this slush fund, as you call it, that you decided to go after, and why you thought cutting money to this fund was an appropriate step to take.
Yeah, and let's be careful about the words cut the Pentagon's budget, because that's not what we did. What we did was we took away the slush fund that the Appropriations Committee had created. The Pentagon, the Defense Department, had asked for, I can't remember the amount of money, but let's say it's $80 billion for running what they call the Overseas Contingency Account. This is the fancy way of saying the war budget. So the Defense Department asked for $80 billion. By the time it made it to the floor, the number was $85 billion. This was not money that the Defense Department had asked for. It was money that the Appropriations Committee put in. We have known for years, conservatives have known for years, that the war budget has been a great place to hide money. God bless him, but George Bush was great at it. And because, why would you hide money there? Because everybody's afraid to go take it, right? I mean, if you go off and start drawing criticism of the war budget, you run the risk of being accused of being soft on the war, not supporting the troops, etc. So it's a wonderful place to hide money. But enough of us, Republicans and Democrats alike, had just gotten sick of that and said, look, we're not going to stand for this anymore. The Defense Department asked for $80 billion. We're going to give them $80 billion, and that's what the amendment did.
Now, the vote here was interesting because there was division amongst both parties. Why were so many folks on both sides of the aisle, both Democrat and Republican, willing to leave this pool of money untouched?
Well, a couple of different things. Different things for different people. There's folks who are on the committee in both parties, folks who are, maybe their committee chairman or ranking members who are supporting the committee, that folks who have friends in the Appropriations Committee. There may be folks for whom that $5 billion might have been spent in their district. There's also maybe folks in both parties who are still worried about being perceived as being weak on defense. Conversely, there's both Democrats and Republicans alike who just didn't like the fact that this money was being spent sort of, beyond what the Defense Department had asked for. So it's the type of thing that one of the reasons I think it gets a lot of attention is that it provokes a very healthy debate. It cuts across party lines, and I think that's why it deserves a lot of attention, because it is the type of thing that doesn't fall neatly into that red versus blue kind of discussion.
Oh, the debate was interesting, to say the least. Do you think this debate on this amendment foreshadows what we're going to see as the budget and the funding of the government is debated when Congress gets back into session in the beginning of September?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really know the answer. My initial reaction is to say no, that this was something very specific. Keep in mind, it was the war budget, not the larger defense budget. Those are two separate things. A lot of folks didn't realize, I didn't realize before I got to Congress, that they were budgeted for separately. You have the defense budget, which runs the ordinary defense of the nation, and you have the OCO, or OCO, war budget, which funds the operations mostly in Afghanistan. So this was sort of a centralized discussion on that very small sliver of the overall spending of the government. Again, $80 billion out of almost $4,000 billion that we will spend. So I don't know if it's indicative of the larger discussion that we're going to have. I can tell you that there is a growing group of folks in both parties who are concerned about spending levels. I'm being approached more now by friends across the aisle who are concerned about entitlement. Not nearly enough people coming to talk to me about entitlement reform, but some.
Congressman, who are some of those Democrats who are concerned about these entitlements and cuts to entitlement spending?
I'd rather not say, just because it's not popular within their party. But I will tell you that for example, we have this group that it drives my conservative friends crazy when they find out I'm a member of it. But that No Labels group is a group of about 40 Republicans and 40 Democrats who have gotten together to try and find places to have meaningful reforms, both in discretionary and in mandatory spending. And the members of that group are very well known. So it's not, believe me, it's not a groundswell of support yet. It's certainly not the votes on a bipartisan basis to overhaul the entitlements and to fix Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security like we need to. But I think that the deeper and deeper we get into this debt crisis, the more folks are interested in talking about ways to save money.
There's still some debate about the sequester, whether it's been a good thing or a bad thing. What do you think?
I think it's proven to us one thing, which is that the world is not going to end if the government gets a little bit less money. You know, the president had said that even going so far as back as during the campaign that the sequester was never going to happen, that the world was going to end. You remember the run-up to the sequester, he was back out on the campaign trail talking about how the Republicans had forced him to do this. It was his idea, by the way. And how it was just going to be terrible, the planes would fall out of the sky, and, you know, dogs and cats living together, the whole thing. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It didn't happen because it was pennies on the dollar, quite literally pennies on the dollar. And I think to the extent folks believed the president, maybe next time they won't, but I don't think that many people believed him in the first place, because every American family, including yours, including mine, knows, because we've had to do it, that we could cut a couple of bucks out of the budget. And that's all that this sequester amounted to. So I think in the long run, we'll look back on the sequester, hopefully, as that first step where people realized, you know, wait a second, maybe the world won't end if the federal government doesn't get all the money that it wants. And if that's the message from the sequester, and if the lesson that we learned is how to spend money better, the lesson that we learned is that we can be more efficient, then it will be a lesson that was very, very well made.
You know, as Americans are concerned about the budget in Washington and government spending getting out of control, another thing a lot of folks are taking a hard look at right now is whether or not this $1.3 billion a year aid should still be supplied to Egypt in the form of financial aid as well as military aid. What do you think?
You know, it needs to be debated, because I think I just read over the weekend, or actually I forget what day it is. Maybe today is a Tuesday or Wednesday, so maybe I read it yesterday, that I'm reading something now that the administration may have already cut off funding under the argument that this was a coup. I don't know if that's the case or not. We need to realize, I recognize there are intricacies here. I recognize that this is not a simple world. I recognize the fact that we have treaty obligations with Israel that are actually tied in some fashions to the amount of money we give Egypt. I understand all that. But I think what we're learning here, and if this is a lesson that we learn, then it will be well served. We will be well served as a nation. We're learning that maybe it's not always just good guys versus bad guys. And that maybe in some fights, everybody's a bad guy. And that if everybody's a bad guy, maybe it's better for us just to stay out of it. And yes, I recognize that you can criticize that as being simplistic, but at certain levels, that may be the way the world works, and it may not be in Egypt, but it may be in Syria. And we need to keep that option on the table, that option of recognizing that maybe doing nothing is the best thing that we can do. And that if a bunch of people in another part of the world with a dramatically different culture and religion and background and everything that we have, if they want to fight each other, let them fight each other. That needs to be an option. Whether or not that's the option we pursue in Egypt or in Syria depends, I think, on the facts that as we see them go forward. But that needs to be on the table. And I think more and more Republicans, especially, are recognizing that sometimes doing nothing is the best thing to do.
All right, Congressman Mick Mulvaney of South Carolina's 5th District, one of the guys not afraid to stick out his neck when it comes to cutting government spending. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.